The M1 story, really to me, the M1 story begins back in the early 70s because BMW Motorsport, as we know it today, started in 1972. And in those days, BMW were absolutely dominant in touring car racing all over the world with the CSL, what everybody knows as the bewinged, wide, box-guarded.
And also the 2002.
And the 2002 in various groups. In the early 70s, you know, Porsche were doing their level best to try and conquer BMW. And over the course of most of that decade, you know, they did 6 drivers' championships, they won Le Mans class wins, they won the World Championship of Makes numerous times. They were seriously dominant. BMW's traditional machinery had basically been outclassed. They simply had to come up with a new car that could compete with the evolutionary 911s. And the only way they were going to do that was basically to lay down new plans for a mid-engine car that would take advantage of BMW's ability with engine development, but harnessed inside a chassis that could be used at a much higher level than a saloon basis, which is basically what BMW were famous for, still are.
They went about designing this complete new slate car, mid-engine design, a supercar.
The car's inception was complicated. There were lots of different people involved with it, but ultimately by the time the car was developed, the rules had changed and the stipulation was that 400 road-going units of the car had to exist and be sold to the public for homologation to be granted to the company to race a car in Group 4. This is a rare example of a racing car that became a road car instead of the other way around. That's why I kind of call it Germany's Lancia Stratos. Everybody's familiar with the idea of Lancia building the Stratos to go out and win the World Rally Championship, and the same thing took place. The FIA basically stipulated that a certain number of production cars had to be built and sold to the public, and the same thing happened with BMW.
So Jochen Nierpasch had the great idea that their car wasn't eligible for anything at the time. So whilst they're building these 400 production cars, he thought, let's make a one-make series. We can do whatever rules we want. So they got these Group 4 based cars and started racing a whole bunch of them in a one-make series called the Procar M1 series.
It was run before each and every Formula One Grand Prix of the time. So we had all the F1 drivers, with the exception of the Ferrari and the Renault team, were contracted to basically step into M1 Pro cars, and they basically went out and had a scrap before the Grand Prix, where they would then, you know, step out of their Pro cars and into their Grand Prix cars and go off and run a Grand Prix.
An incredible spectacle because it involved Formula One race meets with Formula One drivers, touring car drivers, the best names in motorsport. The guy that won the first year was Niki Lauda. Nelson Piquet won in 1980, but you've got guys like Fittipaldi, Andretti, you've got all of these incredible names racing these cars, and they were loud, they had wider wheels, they had flares, they had a wing on the back, they sounded incredible, they looked incredible. I mean, it would have been
a spectacle.